What's going on, everyone? So one of the biggest confusion points in this game has to revolve around the swap talisman. We talk about it a good amount. We talk about, when to focus on certain things, but maybe you were playing beforehand and you were going for a different path, and now they've updated the game and there's new weapons, new gear pieces, new double S variants, and well, you're stuck in the background with the savior being the swap talisman. Swap talisman basically allows you to adjust the build to fit the updates within the game, or to make drastic changes and completely change your build in its entirety, which is something that I even did. So I kind of want to talk about the places where you can use it and the times in which you should consider at least using it. And we're going to start off with the very, very traditional way of using it, which is swapping your weapon. One of the biggest things with these swap talismans is, well, you can focus in on a beginner build. It's one of the reasons why a lot of videos early on, and even to this day, recommended going for maybe the angel bow or maybe the blade of justice, because it was on a banner that had two very important secondary pieces of gear, the ring and accessory, being Bloody Grail and Judgment Ring. Well, because it has those gear pieces on it, a lot of the builds recommended you just upgraded whatever weapon you got from that banner, because it would be easier to utilize that and transition it into one of the other builds out there than just trying to summon on that other banner. Let's say you're actually wanting to go Sky Splitter, but you are summoning on the Blade of Justice banner. Well, acquiring all those Sky Splitters is going to be harder than just summoning on the banner and doing a swap talisman. You can only use a swap talisman when your gear equipment has reached mythic tier. Mythic tier is a requirement, and you can actually see this if you go ahead and click on this little, basically the reverting screen, and there's a little option called swap. You can swap mythic pieces of gear. The input you'll see here requires, well, whatever weapon you want to swap to. Let's say I want to go for the Gale Elris, but this is a double S. I'm going to need a legendary level weapon. And fortunately, I have it right now. But this applies to all of the different variants. You can swap mythic pieces. If I had a mythic Sky Splitter and I wanted to go to Whisper, I would need a legendary Whisper. If I had a double S legendary Sky Splitter and I wanted to go to a double S legendary Whisper or Gale Elris, I would need that copy of the weapon. And this applies to all the different versions. In this case, I have a, mythic or transcendent version of the Sky Splitter, which is Aileron Sword. And if I want to transition over into one of the other weapons, I would need a swap talisman to do so. That is where the double S equipment kind of therein lies. There's also some other ways you can utilize this. For example, if I wanted to go with the Judgment Ring, I can swap that over as well. Doesn't have to necessarily be a weapon. I can just revert all of this and put in my legendary piece of gear. Let's say I wanted to go for, a transcendent version of the Elenos' Creed. Well, I would still need a legendary Judgment Ring. If I wanted to swap it over to the Julian's Inquisition, I believe that's what this one's called. Yep, Julian's Inquisition. I would need a Dragon Ball Ring, legendary version. So this applies to all the different equipment that you want to swap. Now, it's very important to remember that there doesn't have to be a specific situation where you need to use a swap talisman if you're trying to swap to a piece of gear that is the same starting point. So for example, let's say I do have double Judgment Ring, which I do on my build right now. If I wanted this Elenos' Creed, which started from a Judgment Ring, to be the mythic version, and I didn't want the standard Judgment Ring to be the mythic version, instead I wanted this to be the legendary, I can go ahead and level this down, downgrade it, remove all my gems, revert the Divine Forge, and then, well, I click this casting rollback option, and it will return to me the double S materials, Divine Weapon Cubes. So I don't need to use swap talismans to convert, let's say, as you can see here in the swap screen, this ring to a ring that has the same starting point. So it started from a Judgment Ring. This really only applies to the rings right now. I'm sure we're going to see maybe weapons or accessories that also follow this suit, but it's really important to note because swap talismans are not unlimited. So you want to preserve those swap talismans for when you are swapping like a weapon to another build in its entirety. But that's not the only way we can use swap talismans. Yes, you can swap mythic pieces of gear, double S pieces of gear, etc. Some cases you don't even need to. But the other really, really important update that they've added is the treasure collection screen with the ability to swap between it. So this really applies for those of you that have been in the game for a long time and were here before double S equipment. Before double S equipment, the recommendation was to, get certain arcanas for your pieces of gear, and that would just be the standard single S variants. For example, this Bloody Grail. I wanted the Bloody Grail arcana, but once you double S the Bloody Grail and turn it into a Crimson Chalice, which you can see here, it no longer works. You now need the upgraded version of the Bloodstained Grail that this is. So once I get the double S variant, this arcana is completely worthless. So in order to take advantage of it again, click the little revert button at the top right, and I can dismantle those artifacts or the arcanas for telescopes, and it will return, as you can see, 100% of the resources, albeit it requires a swap talisman. And once I do, I can head over to the exchange shop and then purchase, well, not just the double S equipment treasure box, but also the standard equipment treasure box for weapons and armor, or also a universal crystal to help progress my gear and weapons to mythic level if I'm looking for that. Generally, I would recommend going for the double S arcanas because those are much more rare and hard to obtain, whereas gear will eventually come. But that's another way you can use the swap talisman. It's really, really important that you go ahead and kind of know this, because there are a lot of people that are like, what do I even use the swap talisman for if I don't want to swap a weapon? Well, in my case, I ended up swapping from Whisperer to Sky Splitter because I found it to be a little bit more fun and I felt like it was going to be a little bit more powerful. I think it ended up being both of those things for me. However, what if you want to stick with a weapon and you don't want to use that? Well, you still need swap talismans, especially if you've been a long-term player, or maybe there's going to be in the future, let's say I am using these two rings, but in the future they've added a new ring and I want to swap my build between those. Well, I can also use my swap talismans to revert these as well. Now, how do I want to go about getting swap talismans? Honestly, I would generally avoid trying to get them in the various events. I don't know if this Picnic Monopoly actually has a swap talisman. They generally do. Yep, they do. So you can see here, a lot of the events that come around, you can buy swap talismans for the shop. I would generally steer away from this. They're way easier to obtain, and you don't need a ton of them, but you do need a reasonable supply, and it's really going to be found in the guild shop. Or Magic Crystal shop, not the guild shop. Magic Crystal shop has a monthly pack for a swap talisman. If you haven't been picking this up already, I would consider at least keeping one on hand, just in case. But if you do happen to have a couple of arcana that you really need, this is where I would pick up those swap talismans. Yes, you can get them from those events that come around, but while this store does have some unique things, such as the pet statues, which can be good, generally I'd rather preserve those event resources for the very strong things that you can acquire, and then use my magic crystals for the monthly pack of the swap talisman. And that's pretty much all you really need to know about equipment swapping. Now, as a reminder, since it does require an input of a legendary variant of whatever you're swapping to, it's not always faster to upgrade one and then swap to the other. It really, really depends on your circumstance. So just make sure that you know that before you get into it. The biggest reason is that beginner build swapping into a more endgame build because of the progression you're wanting to acquire through a banner that you're summoning on. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all for the next one.